Speed work should be fast. Hey everybody, it's Jason Blaha here, and I thought I would chat with you guys and gals a little bit about this today. One of these topics where when it comes up, you get people who don't like speed work, they don't think it works, they don't get the concept. They will make arguments about physics, they'll make arguments about velocities, but the thing that they are forgetting is a couple of factors when it comes to this. Number one, we're not looking for certain types of carryover, meaning people are like, well, it's not heavy enough to truly increase one rep max strength in the strictest sense, but it is in its own way. And yes, it does increase hypertrophy. So for people to understand what we're doing with the speed work, particularly with bands and chains, we are chasing compensatory acceleration. And some things that we need to note when you look at science and research, and then setting all that aside, understand that whatever your theories are, why on it doesn't work, are irrelevant because it works in the real world. In other words, when you're trying to debunk something that clearly works, you have to figure out why it's working instead of saying, well, the reason it doesn't work is because of X or Y when it clearly works. People get crazy strong, they get crazy jacked when doing it as part of their powerlifting programming for decades. So, and even at sports, like this stuff is used in high-level sports still. So the thing to think about with the speed work, yes, it's going to be explosive. And here's the idea. By explosive, we mean light and the bar is moving fast. Why does this matter, first of all? Why does it need to be at a certain level of lightness? Because when we are rotating max work and speed work, it's not just about the speed work, it's how it impacts your recovery. It's easy to recover from speed work, right? The eccentrics are not super slow. They're explosive, they're powerful, they tend to be lighter weight. Like for example, you guys know I can box squat straight up 500 pounds, right? I can squat 505 on that box. I've done it before on camera not long ago, okay? What do I have on that bar? Like 170 pounds of bar weight, 110 pounds of chain. Same thing here. You guys know I deadlift in the 600-ish at the moment. I got 225 on there with 150 pounds of bands. This is light. There is no beat up to my recovery. So what this means is we can work another training modality after maxing out. So when you're running speed work with max effort work on different days, you are hitting one rep maxes every week. You're maxing on a squat or a deadlift for a good morning and then some type of bench press or bench variation or floor press or incline, right? Some press variation you were maxing on earlier in the week. There's a recovery component to maxing out. All right, the speed work is not taxing in terms of recovery, number one. Number two, when we think of other stuff it's doing, when you look at EMG data, explosive training, even with lighter weights, still hits the highest threshold motor units. You get to your fast twitch fibers, the ones. So let's say you take a 10 rep max, right? And objectively, in this case, we may be using weights that we can do 10, 12, 15 reps with. But when you look at studies on a 10 rep max, if people just move it at a normal tempo, they don't reach those muscle fibers till around maybe rep 6, right? But if they lift it as explosively as possible, what does that data show? Well, we get a crazy high EMG rating on the very first rep. So we know this happens. We know that we can reach these fibers. Now people say, well, they need to be stimulated and then fatigued, but aren't they being fatigued? In other words, let's say we do 10 triples with the speed bench. And so you're looking at the speed, it stays consistent through there, but let's say every 30 seconds you do a set. So let's say you do 10 triples with this sort of weight. I mean, this is obviously really lightweight. This is really lightweight, guys. It's 135 on the bar plus 50 pounds of chains. But you were lifting it as explosively as possible every rep. Well, you are hitting those upper threshold muscle fibers. And let's say you do 10 triples 30 seconds apart. You start accumulating fatigue. You get 10 sets deep, those 30-second breaks start adding up. But you're reaching those motor units over and over and over and over. So you've got like 30 reps of hitting them. The thing I've noticed, people grow from the speed work. So we can argue all that we want about the hypertrophy, but we're getting to some effective reps because people grow on it. All right. It also gives us practice with first reps. Now, that's a big deal too, because you set up your bench 10 times in a row fast. So when we're doing speed work, it's go, 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 go. Right? We're doing 30-second breaks all the time, 30 second, 45 seconds, between sets, and you're doing up to 10 sets, some cases 12 sets, whatever. Right? You are having to set up quick. You're having to get in a position. You're practicing in a hurry, getting tight, getting in position, walking out a squat, getting it set on your back, setting up your bench, Running over, bracing for your pull, wedging in your pull over and over and over. Okay, this makes you really good at first reps. So this does carry over to your maxes. Plus, keeping in mind, why are we wanting it to move at a certain speed and what are we doing? What Louis Simmons intended with some of that was that for you to reach the same amount of time you can explode. In other words, he had noted that, like, for example, on a bench, you can only grind for 3.5 seconds. You have 3.5 seconds to make that lift. And if you don't get it in that time, odds are you're not going to get it because you cannot produce maximum force longer than that. Your nervous system won't allow it. You're practicing maximum force for a similar time. So if you get these things dialed in at appropriate speeds, your concentric reps added up equals about 3 to 3.5 seconds. Okay? So watch my bar speeds here. Your speed work should be the total time in the concentric rep should be about close to what it is in a 1 rep max. So you're also practicing specificity for a 1 rep max. You're also dealing oftentimes with the bands and chains that change the deceleration curve. This stuff teaches you to get tight and to grind, to push with maximum force for about the same amount of time as you would on a solid 1 rep max if you're moving it powerfully. It also trains you to explode past sticking points. Right? And it causes hypertrophy. You're getting all these things, but with a different performance element in terms of recovery. So you are recovering from it easier than maxes. And that's kind of the beauty of it. And that's what I try to tell people here. You can come in and do this stuff and get stronger on maxes. In fact, I've seen guys who don't have a lot of time. They do the max work and speed work. They only do 20 minutes maybe of other hypertrophy work. They get bigger and their maxes still go up sometimes. Why? Because there's a hypertrophic component, plus this stuff carries over to maxes. And then whatever they do on the other hypertrophy work is still giving them some size. Okay? So what we need to look at is the fact that it has a different recovery component. It doesn't beat your recovery up. Lightweight lifted explosively is fairly easy on your body to recover. It's fairly easy on your nervous system to recover while still training all these things. Okay, and I know people say it can't possibly work, but then you look at it and go, except that it teaches you to explode through sticking points. It has a hypertrophic component. It teaches you to get really good at setting up first reps super fast. What happens when you add all these things together? Well, it will carry over to your maxes, and then your max effort training teaches you how to max out. Okay? It works, and it works in a recovery flow, right? If you do all this stuff right, you don't overtrain. Our recoveries on different timings for these different elements. It works, and it works really, really well. All right, guys, but that's really all I have to say on that today. I hope it's been informative, and I'll talk to you guys and gals next time.